This is a great way. I know Yossi warned us this is the post-lunch lull, but thank you, nice crowd, and we decided we're going to come back. Lisa talked about hope and doing business differently. Ronnie, I've gotten to know you over the years. When you come, whether it's in Tel Aviv or in London or anywhere that I see you, you're very inspiring, and it's a good way to start the afternoon. I do want to point out that if we'd had the 30 under 30 list in the 1970s, Ronnie would have been on it. Ronnie started when he was 27, 26? 27.
26.
26, he started a small venture capital firm. Apex became Apex Partners. How big were you at your peak, or how big did Apex get to?
So our first fund was £10 million. Our last fund is 14 billion, and today we manage $75 billion.
So think about it. When you meet somebody today and say, I just raised 10 million for my crypto hedge fund, you're on your way to 75 billion. So Ronnie did that when he was 26. I will say that's before my time also, but to actually start a fund like that at that age back then, when people must have been looking at you like you had two heads. Listen, it's hard for everybody. It's never been easier or better time to be a young entrepreneur, but how did you do that? We'll talk, we're going to talk about a lot of really inspiring stuff, but first I want you to share your journey as a really, really pioneering young financier and entrepreneur.
Thank you, Randall. Great to be here with you. Great to be here with all of you entrepreneurs from across the world. When I wanted to kick off at the age of 26 and create Apex Partners, a lot of my friends said to me, shouldn't you get more experience? And I said, you can't learn to swim by doing exercises on the beach. If you find an area that's exciting, you go for it. You're one of the early entrants into it. You develop expertise before others do. Hopefully you develop greater size than others, and then you can aspire to lead the market. And basically that happened with venture capital. It's hard to believe today that the £10 million fund to which you referred, Randall, was the biggest fund in Europe in 1981. But today the same thing's happening again, and this time it's happening with the impact revolution.
So we're gonna, and again, you've been ahead of the curve on that, ahead of the curve on so many different things. I do want to point out, because I also think it's part of what makes your story so good, that you were, despite the lovely British accent, you were born in Egypt, right? And you were essentially a refugee.
Yep. My family was kicked out of Egypt when I was 11 years old in 1957 after a cataclysmic geopolitical event called the Suez Crisis. And we arrived in Britain as refugees, and I couldn't speak English.
So I think also, even thinking about this morning, and we had the panel on Ukrainian entrepreneurship. It's inspiring, but it reminds us again that we all have to pitch in here, because there's so many talented people who are on the move for no reason that had to do with themselves. And there's a Sir Ronald Cohen out there, or probably many of them. All right, let's talk about how you shifted. For those you've written, I've read 2 of your books, and you probably, how many books have you written?
3.
3. Okay, I'm 2/3 done. But the focus, when did you move from, your first career, which was, making smart investments to make money, to making investments to create change? How did that evolution happen?
So the first thing is, Randall, my generation is the 60s generation, the 60s kids. It was all about flower power and idealism and anti-nuclear armament and so on and so forth. So I was idealistic. When I got into venture capital, which I discovered at business school in the US, was just beginning to emerge, when I saw the opportunity to create jobs in a country which had a lot of unemployed people, which was the UK then, and to make huge amounts of money if you back entrepreneurs who become successful. It enabled me to satisfy my need to do something that's important as well as to make money. I knew I had to make money because my parents lost everything. My father was 44 when he arrived in the UK, and from an early age I knew I'd have to look after my parents in their old age. But by the time I reached the age of 53, and Apex was already big and I'd made a lot of money, I said to my partners, I'm going to leave at the age of 60. I don't want my epitaph to read, he delivered a 30% annual return, right? It seemed to me my life should be about more than that. And I wanted to devote my life to two important issues. One was the whole area of social issues, because I was helped and I became successful, and I wanted to do the same. And I realized that somehow philanthropy wasn't solving the problems that government failed to solve, that there had to be a more important, more powerful way to tackle social issues than just give money away. And the second thing was, being Egyptian-born, with a wife who's Israeli, whose dad was the commander of the Exodus, the ship that brought Holocaust survivors to Israel and became part of the catalyst that created the state. I thought I could do
just
something.
for history, it was a ship that brought Holocaust survivors to Israel and was turned away because they were refugees, correct?
Yeah, there was a British blockade to prevent too many Jews from arriving in Israel in 1947 because of pressure from Arab states on the British government. And this ship tried to run the blockade and was rammed by destroyers, and the passengers, who were all Holocaust survivors, ended up being taken back to detention camps in Germany, if you can believe it, in Hamburg. And it created a huge international outrage, which helped to get the vote later that year at the United Nations to establish the State of Israel.
So you're somebody who the refugee experience, both from yourself and then your wife's side, is very personal, right?
But I left Egypt at the age of 11, Randall, with the feeling that Muslims, Jews, and Christians could coexist beautifully. That's how Egypt was. When I asked my dad, what's religion about, I must have been 6 or 7 years old. He said to me, they're just the same sides of a pyramid, getting to the same God at the top. And so I kept that feeling, and this conflict between Israelis and Palestinians is something that can be solved. I know people despair, but people despaired about Northern Ireland too, and that's certainly been solved for the last few years.
So we're gonna get into that, but then so you're in your 50s, turning 60, and then so how did you decide? And to your point, and I think that's something that we've seen in this region, and philanthropy is amazing, but if it's a Band-Aid a lot of times. But you really, and there's a lot of very smart philanthropists who are trying to build systems, but realistically, to solve problems, you need sustainable solutions, correct? So how did you take that VC mindset towards the social space?
So philanthropy is vitally important and necessary, but it's a drop in the ocean in comparison with financial markets. And I was lucky, like all of you will be. You'll all get breaks in life, and you'll have to take advantage of them when they present themselves. I got a phone call from the British government in 2000 when I was 55, and I was still very much involved in running APACs. Will you look at the issue of poverty? And we created a task force which published a landmark report basically saying, if you want to deal with social issues, then you have to bring investment into it. There's 300 trillion of investment money in the world, and there's probably a philanthropic pool each year of 1.5 trillion. So massively greater. And that led me to, over the last 22 years, to work on this question of bringing investment to tackle social or environmental issues. And what I discovered, Randall, is the world is going in the direction of creating a balance between risk, return, and impact. If you look at ESG investing, how many of you know what ESG stands for? That's most of you. Environmental, social, and governance investment, whose aim is to deliver social or environmental improvement, preferably both, as well as profit. It's over 40 trillion today, not billion, trillion. If you look at impact investment proper, which goes beyond the intention, as you were saying, to measuring the impact creating, it's over $2 trillion already. And if you look at entrepreneurs around the world, they're beginning to realize, first of all, that it brings meaning to their lives, meaning that all of you are looking for in your careers, as well as financial success, that you can create ventures that do good and do well at the same time, and create huge wealth, create unicorns that don't just get to a value of $1 billion, but improve the lives of 1 billion people. And you see people across the whole world today, Randall, developing these new business models. And I know he's not very popular for other reasons, but Elon Musk is today the example of what can be achieved financially if you optimize risk, return, and impact. Because he didn't go to the automobile industry because it was a great, easy opportunity to make money, right? Toughest industry of all, over 100 years old, leaders that have been established for decades. No, he went in because he felt that with new technology, he could shift the industry away from the combustion engine and all the pollution it creates. And so this combination of risk, return, impact today, and I say this for all of you who are thinking about creating your own ventures, the combination of risk, return, impact at the heart of your ventures enables you to attract the best talent, consumers much more easily, and investors.
Here's the multi-trillion-dollar question: is the risk and reward we get, and the return we get, how do you measure, and this is something you've covered, how do you measure that impact?
So that change in values that all of you young people in this room embody, which is we don't want to buy the products of companies creating harm, we don't want to work for them. That change in values led to the $40 trillion. That's one moving force. Technology is another massive force now, because for the first time in human history, artificial intelligence, machine learning, augmented reality, the genome and computing coming together enable us to deliver impacts globally in very powerful ways. And the third one, Randall, is the technology enables us today, big data and machine learning and computing enable us today to measure the impact a company creates through its operations on the environment, through its employment on people, through its products and its supply chain on people and the environment, and to translate them into monetary terms.
Let's delve into a case study here with your Portland Trust. I mean, you're a huge backer of Palestinian entrepreneurs, with the idea that we've been addressing across the day that no offense to the politicians, but they're not very good at getting things done, where entrepreneurship offers a path to the future that we all want. So tell us a little bit about how you've applied this philosophy here around Israel.
So there are two big streams in the impact world today, investment streams. One goes to pay for success instruments like those we're using in Palestine and 35 other countries across the world, and I'll talk about that. And the other is bringing big companies and small companies to help solve our social and environmental problems. And I just want to nail that first question of yours, Randall, by saying a project I chair at Harvard Business School has published thousands of companies' impacts in monetary terms. You think you can't measure impact, but environmental impact has become easy to measure now. 3,000 companies' impacts have been measured over 10 years. How many do you think create more damage a year than profit? 450. How many do you think create damage equivalent to a quarter or more of their profit? 1,000. And so we begin to put a frame around it. 2/3 of companies create environmental damage of less than a quarter of their profit, and they can transition. Now come to diversity. What's the cost of lack of diversity for Amazon and Apple? If you think a person from an ethnic background or a gender doesn't get a job because of whatever circumstances, including discrimination, what's the economic cost to the community or to the world? Well, it's the amount of money they would have earned. That would have gone to their community and isn't. Measuring it like that, Amazon's diversity debit is $6.5 billion a year. Apple's $2.5 billion a year. But if you relate it to wages, who's the better performer? Amazon. 16% of wages is the diversity debit. Apple, 24%. So when you measure, you can manage. And governments can give incentives or levy taxation on the companies doing the wrong thing. Now coming to your question about the efforts in Palestine.
But just touching on that, though, it's not just measuring, but it's also then systemizing that management so that it becomes kind of the goals. You know, once you have, you know, a consistency across the world, and that's probably would be the next step, is that when you have consistent standards, then we actually can start holding companies to account country by country, especially if they're multinationals, right?
Of course, and the SEC, which regulates all of the financial industry in the United States, put on the table 2 months ago the mandatory publication of all environmental impacts, including supply chains, in the United States. The organization responsible for the rest of the world has created a standards board to do what you've said, Randall, to standardize the measure of both environmental and social impact. So for all of you setting out on your careers, think that the world is shifting to risk-return impact, that we're going to be able to measure not just the profit of your companies, but to measure their impacts as well, and that the leaders, the new leaders in business, are going to be those that know how to do good and to do well at the same time.
Well, and the consumers can see those scores transparently, and then it's self-fulfilling. All right, so to Palestine.
So Palestine, how do you resolve the conflict?
Well, the last time I saw you, I think we were in Rawabi together. You know, I mean, Ronnie does the work, so.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what Rawabi is, how many of you have heard of Rawabi? Few of you. So Rawabi is a new Palestinian city, super modern, 21st century city, becoming a bit of a tech hub. of 5,000 homes, of which 1,300 have been built and another 1,300 are being built now. And I'm very proud to say that the Portland Trust, which I chair, played a hand in funding the master plan of Rawabi to enable its Palestinian entrepreneur, basically, to create something which both governments would support. So investment to create jobs, to set new objectives, new models, to reshape perceptions is very important. But how do you create jobs? You can't create tech businesses if you don't train young people like yourselves to become coders or data analysts. And how do you do that? Well, the government doesn't have enough resources to do it. The universities do a certain amount, but the graduates aren't ready to go into a tech job. So you need someone to pick up the challenge then and take the young people, put them through training, perhaps work within a company for a period of time in an internship, and then help them get into jobs. And the best way to do that, in my view, is through pay for success. So there's a social impact bond of $5 million to create jobs for younger and older people, where a group of philanthropists and others have said, we will pay for the results when they're achieved. We'll pay for every young person who comes from being unemployed with a degree in computing or whatever, getting into a job. And when you sign a contract with delivery organizations that are working to train these young people, what do? You give a philanthropic organization the same ability as a business to raise money. Because investors are plentiful now that want to do good and to do well at the same time, that can provide money to help Palestinian kids complete their education in computing, get a job, and transform their lives. And so that's how impact bonds work. And here in Israel, on the other side of the border, there are now 70 young women in the Druze community. These women, young women, are 25 years old, average. They have 3 kids each, and they cannot work outside of the village for religious reasons. So what do? You create a facility with a sustainable model. You bring a coder, and over a period of 8 months, these young women multiply their salary by 4 or 5 times relative to what they were making working as a cashier in the supermarket. And then they get employed in that facility, and the companies employing them, international companies and Israeli companies and others, pay for the position they occupy in that facility, and the whole thing becomes sustainable, and you can grow it to, a multiple of that.
Well, it's sustainable and it's scale. I mean, the only way we're gonna solve anything is scale. We're out of time. Maybe one quick exit question and answer for you. I think almost everyone's who's going to Jerusalem. Join us going all the way. Pretty much everybody, right? So we've got a day where we're going to be working, and everybody here is going to be into the Peace Through Entrepreneurship business, where we're going to be mentoring and working with entrepreneurs from Palestine, from Israel, from different groups. What would you say for this group in terms of, as they work with these to mentor these entrepreneurs, what would be kind of the thing that you would look for that could accelerate them? How could we use our time best?
What's the characteristic of entrepreneurship? It's to build the future of your company, right? The same is true of a country. We need Palestinian entrepreneurs. And believe me, from my long experience, you can tell by my gray hair, ability is evenly spread across the world. Opportunity isn't. And so as you work with your Palestinian counterparts, help them to identify opportunity for them to create big businesses and ways in which you can help them to achieve that. We have to get both sides of this conflict to look to the future and to stop dealing with the problems of the past.
All right, you've got your mission. Everybody, I only have one friend who's been knighted by the Queen, but you know he goes by Ronnie, which you're a good and humble man, and I'm honored to be your friend. So, and thank you for coming, and thank you.
Thank you all.
You all know what you have to do on Wednesday, so keep this guy in mind.